fantastic insight session on putting users back in charge, a human-centered approach to AA flow design. Insights are from Kanika Kumar, who is the director of IDEO, and Dipika Prasad, who is the senior design lead at IDEO. IDEO believes in a more sustainable, equitable future for all of us to design. For decades, they have helped individuals, leaders, and organizations navigate complexity by designing products, services, and experiences of the future. Our first speaker has an MBA from the SamvAAd Business School. Is it right? Yeah, okay. University of Oxford with 15 years of experience in product design, strategy, user-centered solutioning, and market expansion from South and Southeast Asia and East Africa. Prior to IDEO, she led the corporate strategy and global business development team at Intel Cap. She is an alumni of the World Economic Forum Global Shaper Community and a GP Birla Fellow. Please help me welcome, with a huge round of applause, Kanika Kumar, who is the director at IDEO. And next, we have, she has spent the last decade building audacious tech to solve urgent and complex problems. She says it felt a lot like living in the future with friends. At IDEO, she is designing for the big wave of new internet users adopting digital financial services across emerging markets and has prototyped, built, and launched a variety of DFS products focused on saving, lending, e-commerce, and agency banking. She has also served as an advisor to the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Entrepreneurship and the CII's Indian Women Network. Please put your hands together for Dipika Prasad, Senior Design Lead, IDEO.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for the very kind introductions. We're here today to share with you what we've done over the last couple of months with SamvAAd and many of our colleagues from the account aggregator ecosystem on building a citizen-friendly or user-friendly account aggregator flow. Wait. But I think you've already heard about IDEO. But just to quickly introduce those of you that don't know IDEO, IDEO is a global design and product innovation consulting company with over 4 decades of experience from around the world. In India, Dipika and I work to invest and support consumer fintech products to launch and scale. And over the last 4 years, we've built and supported over 40 products across savings, lending, and payments. We took a lot of those learnings and brought it into what we've done with SamvAAd and the account aggregator ecosystem. So what we did over the last 2 months is really bring a more human-centered approach to thinking about what it means to design an explicit and informed consent flow by learning from what the industry has already designed and by following some customer guideline principles that the SamvAAd team has already established. And we didn't do this alone. We did this with many, many great minds, many of whom are here in the room. So just a nod and a thank you to all of you that contributed to this. So what did we really work on? Our big challenge was, and I think someone in this room mentioned this some time ago, that the account aggregator flow is quite complex. And how do we make it as easy as UPI is today, while still adhering to the spirit of account aggregator, which is explicit and informed consent? So really trying to balance agency and transparency along with seamlessness and intuition was the goal that we set out to achieve. And I'm going to hand it to Dipika to walk you through some of our learnings.
So at IDEO, when we build product, we start with what the users are feeling. And so we spend some time with users across geographies and context, introducing them to AA and seeing where it breaks for them. And 5 big things stood out. The first is that the benefit is just not clear. What is the added benefit of this that's different from what they do today, that's not quite landing for users? And the second is, and this is probably true of all of us in the room, when it comes to financial decisions and transactions, we tend to default to the known. Anything that's new gets alarm bells ringing, and citizens just weren't able to see very many trust signals. And next, even though FIUs and AAs are investing so much time in educating citizens about what account aggregator is and why to trust it, there's just so much information all at one go that it's feeling a little bit like a wall of text. And the thing that stood out across all these citizens again and again is that they were really intrigued by the idea that they are in control and they can revoke consent whenever they want to, but it's just not clear where and how to actually do this. And finally, we're asking citizens to review consent artifacts and look at terms, but there are no existing mental models for people on what is a reasonable request and what is not. We're so used to just tapping accept all terms and conditions and moving on, that suddenly seeing consent terms is a moment of tension. And so with all of this in mind, we got into designing this flow with 4 sort of big design principles that you'll see reflected in the work that we show you. The first is that we've built it to be transparent, but not overwhelming. We want this experience to give citizens a feeling of control, but also educate them about how to exercise that control and when to exercise it. We want this to be trustworthy, and we want trust signals to come not just from saying that, hey, RBI is regulating it, but help citizens feel trust because they're feeling digitally and financially confident while using it. And then finally, we're realizing that just like with UPI, using AA is also going to be a bit of a learning journey. And so we want to handhold citizens through that learning journey. And so those are the principles that we've used to design this flow. Now, it is an embedded flow, which is how most citizens will experience AAs for the first time. Our intention with this flow is that we built it to be a provocation to all of you who are building consumer-facing fintech apps to see how AA can come and fit into your product. But we also hope that some of this over time can become more standardized. So today, when I use UPI, regardless of whether I'm using it on Paytm or Google Pay or PhonePe, the experience is very standardized. And that's what drives trust in UPI. It has to be the same with AA as well. So hopefully, this can start the conversation about how experiences can be more standardized. So with that, I'll jump into it. We don't have the time to demo the whole thing today, but we will leave you with resources where you can look at the end-to-end flow as well. So the first moment, and this is really critical, is where account aggregator is introduced for the first time. So for the purpose of this demo, we've used a fictitious FIU called Moneybox. Let's pretend that's an app that exists, and it's an app that helps people with wealth management advice. And in order to give good wealth management advice, they need account data, so your bank account spending, mutual funds, and so on. And they're going to get all of that data from a fictitious AA called Ekjut. So assuming that that's the setup, this is the first moment where a citizen will see account aggregator as an idea for the first time. And we're saying that leading into that moment, it's really important to establish why is this data even important? What are they going to get by giving this data to Moneybox? And making it clear what cannot be done with this money. And that's because when we were speaking with users, a big tension that came up again and again when they looked at the words share account was, does this mean you can now debit my money? So making it clear also what cannot be done. There's a simple bite-sized intro to A, and once users commit and are ready to go forward, there's a drawer-up that introduces it with one big value proposition. We're leaving it to the fintechs to decide what that is for their context, and some trust signals. 30+ banks support this, and it's regulated by RBI. Next, there's a moment of eligibility check, and this is important because not all types of accounts, and not all organizations are onboarded to AA yet. So it's important to make sure that this whole thing actually works for the user before you send them into the flow. And then there is the moment of either registering or logging into an account aggregator. Now, this is another moment where we're seeing a lot of drop-offs, especially for organizations that stick to the spirit of the regulation and make it clear that there is a handoff happening from the FIU to the AA. So we have three sort of big design recommendations in this moment. The first, and Kanika, if you go to the next slide, is actually that we're recommending that there be auto-discovery of whether this user has an existing AA account or not. This is such a new concept for people that we think that they will set up AA accounts and forget that they have them. So auto-discover whether there is an existing AA can help to shorten the entire journey. And then on top of that, if there is, regardless of whether there is an AA or not, and if you go back to the previous slide, we're recommending that FIUs introduce, whether it's registration or login, introduce the process through a single AA. There's already a lot of complexity in this moment, and the moment you say that, hey, there's 19 AAs, you can choose anyone to register, that just compounds complexity. So having a preferred partner actually eases some of that anxiety for users. And then introducing what are the benefits of using this account aggregator, and again, why to trust it. And from there on, that now goes to the moment of discovering and linking accounts, for which I'll hand over to Kanika.
Thanks, Dipika. So this is probably the second most, I believe we've heard from others in the industry that this is a high drop-off moment and is a moment of overwhelm because it is a bit of a decision-making moment. And what we've learned from users is that they like to see information that allows them to make a more informed decision alongside the moment that this decision is being made. So if you notice here, we've highlighted the information related to the FIP account that they will be sharing, and we highly recommend corresponding that. The second big thing you'll see in this screen is that this is just a one category card with the bank accounts. And we think that it is important to gradually ease users into making multiple decisions at one time. Because in the offline world, some of these processes take days and take months. And so we recommend that when there are multiple FIP categories, to break it down into smaller chunks so users can process more on the go. If you move ahead, the next moment is really the moment of authorization. And we've heard multiple times that this is another moment of drop-off because there are too many OTPs. And while at this moment, the tech stack doesn't allow for a one OTP authorization across FIPs, we think what might help users feel like they're progressing and they're closer to the end is allowing them to track the number of authorizations left. It feels like you're making progress. And making the moment of authorization more intentional, once again to adhere to the spirit of being more explicit and informed as they're moving forward. This is really probably our most important recommendation as we designed this provocation. And this is really the moment of consent. I think early in the morning, one of our keynote speakers spoke about how the ecosystem probably has to apply a degree of self-restraint to avoid misuse and mismanagement of data. And so while this moment might bring in some level of friction, we think it is necessary so that users become more aware of what account aggregator is, what it does, and what the consequences of their action are. And so some of the ways we've kind of highlighted that through design. One of it is you'll see that the language used here is simplified and now in more spoken language. So we've taken consent artifacts and then made it more spoken language. Another thing you'll see, this red flag. We think it is probably the responsibility of an account aggregator in pursuit of building a trusted relationship with users to flag off in moments where there are patterns that are out of the normal. This is only a provocation, and this might not necessarily be the place a red flag shows up. But this is a provocation for account aggregators to take more responsibility around how data is used. This is again a moment to show users how they can revoke consent. And finally, we've introduced some positive friction to allow users to carefully consider this moment, and so changed it from a click interaction to a swipe interaction so that they don't just click through this moment. And then most transaction confirmation moments are again a moment of anxiety and confusion, especially if it tends to take time. And so the one recommendation we have here, based on user research, is allowing users to know what's happening and what to expect. This is also a great way to build some familiarity on what to come for future interactions. And just like in UPI, we now have mental models around how long it takes, what happens if it doesn't work. We want to build that understanding and appreciation through a screen like this. This moment is one that we're actually most excited about, and hopefully some of you will consider trying this and including it into your workflow. As you might know, most of us are quite familiar with confirmation screens, taking screenshots of them or sharing a confirmation of a payment with users via WhatsApp. And so what would a similar artifact look like in AA? And that's kind of what we visualized here. Designing a data receipt of sorts that folks can share and save for their own personal records. You'll also see here at the bottom, there's a bar that would allow users or to nudge the users to download the account aggregator app. And we think this is a good place for the account aggregator to push the user to build a more direct relationship with the account aggregator, as we believe that in the years to come, this is going to become more mainstay. And finally, this is a whole bunch of screens, but we've put the entire revoke flow here. And the reason we're really sharing this is because this is one thing we heard across the board from users, that they know they can revoke consent, but they probably don't know how, and it's not always clear. So our first recommendation here is to have the option to cancel more clearly present, either in the profile information or in a place that users can access more easily. Another key recommendation here you'll see in the second screen is before the handoff moment into the account aggregator flow, we highly recommend letting the user know the consequences of their action. Sometimes they might want to cancel it, but not entirely aware of what happens when they do. And so this is probably a moment for the FIU to still retain the user, but also build awareness amongst the user. And finally, the last thing, sorry, Dipika, if you can just go back up. The last screen you'll see here, we're recommending that there's also a moment here once they cancel their consent to review any other consent that they might have with the same FIU, so they can take a more holistic decision around how they want to proceed with their relationship with that FIU. So these are some of our recommendations. And thank you so much for listening to us. We're happy to take questions in the next 2 minutes, I can see. And this is a QR code. Dipika and I are around if you want to chat with us. There's also a link within that to explore these Figma prototypes. And I think it'll be up on GitHub as well. Oh, it's already up on GitHub as well. Thank you so much. Are there any questions?
Just a quick one. I mean, have these screens actually been tested? Because what we normally face when designing screens is, especially on Figma, is too much of information. Like, for example, I've seen some of the screens went down to 2 pages. I mean, if you run it on your mobile screen. So have these screens actually been vetted and tested on some of the processors or some of the customers? Just wanted to get some idea on that.
That's a
you.
great question. And like we said, this is a provocation for folks to take and iterate and build upon. What we've tested are the building blocks of these screens. So what users want, what are their behaviors, what are their motivations, and what are they seeking in those moments, and try to bring that to life through the design. They might not necessarily be the most perfect design that will achieve the outcome. Is there
Sounds good.
anything else you know?
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Great.
I call upon Vamsi.
Thank you.
Say that for a second because I need to do stuff. But I want to just mention a couple of things. I went to Dipika and Kanika about 2-3 months ago because the problem we were trying to solve was how do you actually do explicit informed consent, which doesn't sound like throwing the kitchen sink at the citizen and scaring them away, right? I mean, that's really the big problem. And I'm unabashedly a great fan of the work that Dipika, Kanika, and Anu, the colleague, did. I think the approach was very, such kinds of engagements could happen in one of two ways. You do a very long, deep sort of work, do multiple iterations, or you do a short work, get a lot of collaboration in a short span of time. So we put together a design review board which had representation from nearly all the A's. Some of the volunteers that I'd called out early who've done work on the customer experience guidelines. A very tight process over 6 weeks, about 7 weeks, to come up with, I learned many new words. Provocation is one of them. So please visit SamvAAD's GitHub repository. All of these are there to further engender conversation and improve. But thank you so much for doing what you did. The small token of our appreciation. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Bye.